Hey everybody, it's me checking in. Gonna be doing a video today on doing some blue pine tables. You can see I got the stock ready to go. I know it's been a while since I've been putting videos out. What you're not seeing outside of this tarp here is I've been working on a 3,000 square foot hand-built timber frame shop. I've been working out of this space now for 2 or 3 years, and I've outgrown it over the last couple of years, and it's time to make a shop. So instead of making videos lately, I've been working on the shop, on the final stretches of it, so I can probably start making videos again. But for today's video, we're going to be doing some blue pine tables. I've already got my material picked out. I got these two book match slabs right here, and then I have the centerpieces here in the back. So what you're going to see me doing today, at least in this initial part, is working on the joinery to get these two book matches worked out so that they're proportional and ready to receive those. And to do that, I'm going to be using this Festool track saw. This one right here is the TS75EQ. If you're just starting out making tables, you really don't need a saw this nice. I make a lot of tables and do a lot of countertops and stuff like that. So for me, I can justify getting a piece of equipment like this. It saves me between 4 and 6 hours on pieces, depending on how complex it is, because I can only do the joint one time with this, whereas if you do it the DIY method with just a regular skill saw and a piece of square stock, to keep your edges straight, you may have to run the joint 3 or 4 times every time, and we're going to be doing like, I don't know, 8 joints on this one. So you think about an hour every joint, it can add up. So yeah, I'll be using this tool. You'll be seeing me use some other tools that may not be available to DIY people, but I can assure you, when I first started doing this stuff, I started with the same tools that you guys have, as far as just your regular power saws that you get at the hardware store, and your regular sanders, belt sanders, stuff like that. Everything you see me use today is really upgraded just for the time savings. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and extend this track out. It's a little bit short on both ends. It needs to be about a foot past on every end. So I'm going to put a track addition on this. I'm going to work on getting these two joints together, and I'll do that in a time lapse, and then we'll work on getting those other ones. One other thing I should say about these two slabs is they've already been straightened out. I've noticed it's really easy. It makes the job a lot easier as if you straighten the slabs out prior. This is a softwood, so you can pull the curves and stuff out of it, which is how I've been doing my tables for a really long time. And again, for time savings, it saves you an hour or two just by having straight material. So these have all been laser straight. There's no curves or no twists or anything like that. They're all kiln dry. They have been planed, but you can see, you might not be able to see it in the video, but there is some rough stuff. So there's going to need to be some touch-up work in these, along with some of this area right here needs to be touched up. We're going to have to heat these up and get the resin up. So I'll be showing you all the different tricks I use to stabilize pine. Anybody that works with pine will know prior to this video that it can be really difficult to work with, because it's got a mind of its own. Just because it's dry doesn't necessarily guarantee you a stable piece. So I'll be showing you the tricks I use to keep it straight, to make it straight, and to make sure that it lasts for a real long time, and it's still able to, you can upgrade it and do whatever else you want to do as far as refinishing and stuff. These kind of tables will last longer than you or I, so if you ever get the chance to do a table like this, it's a lot of fun, and hopefully watching this video you'll see some of the stuff I do and take some tricks away from it. So that's how I learned how to get to where I am, and you know, anytime you can up your game, it's kind of nice to see how other people do stuff. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start a time lapse and pick you up on the next one when we start to do the centerpieces. So. All right, so in that last video you saw me recut these center pieces. I actually came out at about 42 inches wide, which is a little bit too much for what this build's supposed to be. It's supposed to be 40 inches, so that's a minimum. And then I've got like flare outs like this right here that probably push out to 30 or to 45, 43, somewhere around there. So the minimum size on this table is 40. I took out about 1 inch. There's a defect up here. One of the knots blew out when I was cutting, which does happen quite a bit with this knotty pine. So rather than looking for the knot and gluing it back in, I just grated it out when I went to go narrow this down to 40, which worked out pretty dang nice. But whether or not you can see this in the video, the next step is going to be to flush up this joint. Now with knotty pine, it's kind of hard to get the joint to be dead on first cut, because these are kiln dry and they have a tendency to have a lot of tension in them from being dried too quick. And that doesn't necessarily happen all the time. I've even worked air dry pine before that also had a lot of wood tension in it. And it's just something that comes with resin-based wood where they're really hard to get from being squirrely. So either way, the solution is once you get the joint roughed out like this, is to run your blade down the joint again and to get it flushed out. So even if the joint was like this and you followed it like that, eventually you're going to get it to match up. So luckily this one right here is only about the width of a blade, which is ideal for flushing it up. If it's any wider than this, which does happen, especially if there's a whole bunch of tension and you pull it, you cut it down the middle or something and the grain just makes a big old bow, you might have to run the blade down it a few times. So that's another advantage of the track saw. Saves me a bunch of time there. The other thing that happens with getting these joints not quite flush is if your saw blade isn't exactly 90 degrees, which is really hard to get it absolutely perfect. You know, there's all kinds of variables that can go in there for kicking it out, or it's not even straight in the first place. So by running the joint again with your saw, it doesn't matter if you're a degree off or so because it matches that joint on both pieces. So that's what you're going to see me do now. I have these special prototype versions here to hold the pieces together. So I got 2 pieces of wood with screws in them. We'll pull the table together as good as we can, and we have to keep it together, and we have to keep it isolated together. So you can't use clamps, because the second you run that blade through, the clamps are going to pull the joint together even further. So we want to keep it together and keep it where it's at. So even once that joint's cut down, well, it'll be showing a blade's width. Then we release these, pull it together, and we should be flush. So that's the way I get my joints together, is just by using a couple boards to hold it in place while we rip the joint. So that'll be the next thing you see me do. Alright, so I got her glued up now. Uh, I, I had to put quite a few clamps on it just because there were some of these spots in the joinery that weren't quite flush. That's the only reason. I don't know if there's another reason that other people put lots of clamps on, but in this case, I had to do it to pull the joint together in certain spots. So when you have this many clamps, sometimes your piece tends to buckle from putting a bunch of pressure on that joint one way or the other. In my case, most of the time it seems to go like this. So to keep it straight throughout the gluing process, I put these straight pieces of 2x4 square tubing and clamp that. That makes sure to keep it flat. So now that everything's straightened out and ready to go, I'll let this sit for probably 12 hours overnight. So the next video is going to be me pulling the clamps off of this. And running it through the sander. I'm not going to show both pieces just because the process is the same on both things. It's just we got to glue that one together. Then we'll run this through the sander tomorrow, and then we'll glue both of the sanded pieces together on the middle joint. So the next part of the video is going to be me running this through the sander. And I always look for when I get my 2x4s in, I always look to make sure that there isn't more than a 30-second worth of gap between the 2x4 and the table, as that's what we'll be pulling out on the sander. So when you do it by hand with the orbital or a belt sander, you're not going to get these kind of tight tolerances. But if you want to get a real flush surface through the wide belt sander, it's important to not have a big old cup in it that you gotta sand out, and you'll be able to get this thing dead flat. So all right, we're back. I think I'm on day 3 or day 4 of this build. I pulled the clamps off this morning, and now it's going to be cutting the table to length. So now that we have our full piece together, this is kind of the artistic part of the build where we can grade out any defect or accent any of the cool character parts of the piece by cutting it to length. So I've got 6 inches of play to figure this out. That's what you're going to see me doing first. And then I'll also be doing the reinforcements on the back side of the table. So this being pine, I think I've already mentioned it earlier in the video, it has a personality of its own. So I've just had better luck by reinforcing the tables or any large piece like this. I do reinforcing. So a lot of that comes from the way the grain is oriented in this piece. So you have grain like this, you have grain like this, grain like that, grain like that. So when it's going to give off moisture or take on moisture, that's going to cause the piece to do stuff. Not always, but when you're doing a customer build, you don't want to have it do anything funny on them that they're not going to be able to fix. So the way I mitigate that is just by putting that reinforcement in. So you'll see me do that. As soon as I cut the length, I'll be flipping it again and putting those reinforcements in. So you can see there's still some work to do in the cleanup. Probably do a little bit of that also. But the first thing I want to do for cutting, like I said earlier, is just to grade out what I do and don't want in the piece. This is obviously going to be the accent of it and some of the knot work on the inside. So I'm just going to, this is the artistic part, so I'm just going to want to stay away from this knot as much as I can. So I'm going to probably try to get the cut somewhere in here. And then the big driver I have in this piece is this knot up here. I don't like to have any cuts in my knot, so I'm either going to have to grade that knot out or try to grade it in if I have enough space. So I'm going to go ahead and start a time lapse to kind of see how I get it done on that, and then maybe resume later on when I get into putting those reinforcements in to explain how that's done. So. Alright, so on that last bit of video, I went ahead and flipped the table over, and I've been doing some small defect patchwork in it, using two different kinds of products. I've been using CA glue and wood hardener, and I just had, for this bit of talking, I just went ahead and grabbed them to show you what they are. This is the CA glue that I'm using right here. It's really just a super glue. And then I also use, depending on how bad the wood is, sometimes with this blue stained wood, you'll have to use wood hardener. And that's just for like really rotten areas in order to get it to firm up. So you put the wood hardener on. This piece I'm not going to have to use it on, but I do use a lot of this, so I figured I'd mention it. This is the only brand that I know of. It would be nice to get this in bulk because I use a lot of it. Both of these are acetone based, so that's kind of important to know for cleanup and for thinning it down. So I use those two things, and then in this one I'm also using just a little bit of wood filler, and this is the one that I use. It's the Famo wood filler, and they have a few different colors. I just used the, whatever this is, buff or something, natural. So this is also acetone based, so you can thin it out with acetone if you need to. And then the other thing is this right here, when you're using the CA glue, this makes it set up pretty much instantly. So there's two different ways to patch up holes in pieces like this, depending on how big they are. If it's something small, I'll use the CA glue stuff. But if it's bigger, it's definitely better to use epoxy. So I prefer the look of the epoxy for doing a hole patch, but the difference is this stuff will set up instantly, whereas epoxy, if you do any epoxy work, you're looking at least 24 hours for it to set up, sometimes 12 depending on how hot you mix it, but you're basically done for the day on the piece if you use epoxy. So on this one I was able to get everything done with the CA glue. Like I say, the only problem with this is if you do anything too big and you use the activator, it does bubble up. So not bubble up, but bubbles do get in the patchwork. So if it's anything real big and you got a bunch of bubbles in it, it'll start to look not so great. So that's that as far as the patchwork. I got all the patchwork done. I think I won't know until I do a final sand. But before I do the final sand, I'm going to be doing all the edge work. So you're going to see me polish this this branch out right here, so it's not something that you can get your clothes and stuff hung up on or cut up on or whatever, slivers. And I still got to bullnose this, the edges for your elbows if you're going to be leaning up against a table. Bullnose the backside. And then I did, before I sprayed the back, I actually did all the bristle work too to get all the like debris off the edges. So these are pretty much sealed up. So I just use a DA grinder, disc abrasive grinder. It's an air tool. Obviously the wire brush is the one I use to do the edges. And then I use, these are all actually for metalworking, but they work really good for detailed woodworking. So I use a couple of these different tools that you can get for it. These ones right here are the ones I'll be using for profiling this because they take the wood off better. These ones polish, this one polishes. So that's what you're going to be seeing me do on this one. Start out with the DA tool, do the sanding, and then I'm going to be doing all kinds of sanding on this top to get it to where it needs to be for spraying it. And so I'll be doing spraying. Sometimes I can get 2 coats in a day. Hopefully I can get at least 1 coat in today for the base coat and then finish it out. So the rest of the video, that's what it's going to be, is me just finishing out the piece. So glad you got a chance to watch it. If you have any questions or stuff, go ahead and leave some comments down below. Or if you have suggestions on finish types and stuff like that or whatever, I do read that stuff. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and finish out the piece and go from there.